So this morning, we're going to talk about the genius of the and. When we encounter problems, and this is a perfect example of what's going on this morning, we often try to rely on our experience to quickly sort through the possibilities and pick the best one, right? We also risk choosing a tried and true option over and over again, but it may be one that's no longer working for us. If it worked yesterday, Zoom updated the software and it's not going to work today. So how do we move out of this trap of limited and repetitive thinking? In the book BE 2.0, which is short for Beyond Entrepreneurship, the two management innovators, Jim Collins and Bill Lazier, invite us to consider that, in this quote, "Builders of greatness are comfortable with paradox. They don't oppress themselves with the tyranny of the or, which pushes people to believe that things must be either A or B, but not both. Instead, they liberate themselves with the genius of the and." So when we approach our challenges, obstacles, and problems with a paradox mind, we're able to embrace this and. We open ourselves to a sense of curiosity and new possibilities, and we can go beyond choosing A or B to also consider A and B, or C, or D, or Z, any of the infinite possibilities, right? Now, on the surface, making the time and the space to go beyond the tried and true solutions seems less efficient, like we're just reinventing the wheel. On the other hand, considering other possibilities is necessary if we're going to evolve beyond the short-sighted solutions that only perpetuate the underlying problems. What if the wheel is broken and it needs to be replaced with a new wheel? Or something completely different, like perhaps a set of wings to fly. Right? There's a third way that we're trying to evolve towards. In our world today, we see the tyranny of the or in almost every aspect of life. For generations, we have chosen between seeming paradoxes only to stand now on the precipice of everything falling apart. The systems and the ways of thinking that we've utilized up until now are no longer sustainable. When we're choosing either or, we end up with wars. We end up with people saying it's my way and you can't have your way at all, right? We no longer get to choose between economic growth or taking care of people. We need to do both for the future of the planet. We don't get to choose between technological advances or preserving the environment. Climate change is real, and how do we live within that reality at the physical level? It's not about what's good for ourselves and the few who are just like us, or do we choose taking care of others and providing safety and freedom for all people, right? It's about that paradox mindset of and, the genius of that and. Some elected officials and activists have been standing 100% devoted to their group's position on social issues or legislative positions and adamantly committed to not working with others who behave or believe differently than themselves. Even worse, they're labeling anyone who disagrees with them as the despicable others and whatever other names they attach, right? These systems are crumbling, collapsing from within. So instead, we have to focus on letting go of rigidity, finding new solutions, setting aside our differences and working together, working towards a third way. The third way is as simple as this example. Let's say that you are asked to choose between 2 points of view. Is person A right or is person B right? All right. Now, the old way, you have to choose either A or B. One is right and the other one's wrong. All right. Now, the third way would recognize that both people are part of the one life that is God, and so both people are expressing a part of the divine, and if that is the case, then both A and B need to be part of what is. This is the paradox mindset, right? This is the genius of the end. So when we notice the paradoxes of life, we are called to be both curious and vulnerable. Now this is in contrast to what our society teaches us to do. People want us to give them a firm answer, and it better be the right answer, and it better be right now, because they need it now. Right? Don't take the time to ponder the question or consider alternative possibilities or consider something new. Nope. Pick right now, that's it, and go with it, right? So when people are out in the world or on social media, they have this pressure to look perfect. And so what do? We put our best foot forward. We put on our mask and our makeup and our best clothes. And when people ask us, how are you? We answer, I'm fine, when we're really not. We get stuck in perfectionism. We have that perfect outside appearance, even if it's false and only skin deep. We don't ask for help when we need it. We try to be solo acts rather than having we're social animals. We're designed to work together collectively. That's how we take care of each other and ourselves. But what if it is really all messy on the inside? Heaven forbid we should ever say, I don't know the answer. And may not know it tomorrow. Right? That would make us vulnerable and uncertain. And let the whole world know it, right? When we're going through a change, a challenge, we're looking at new possibilities. We don't know what the new form will be. It's like looking at a caterpillar when it's inside the chrysalis and trying to predict what type of butterfly it will become. It takes about 2 weeks for a butterfly to move through the pupa stage to a typical butterfly to transform. Some species of butterflies even spend 2 months in the chrysalis so that they can wait until spring to open and survive through the winter. Well, if you break open the chrysalis before the transformation is complete, particularly in the first 3 or 4 days of development, you're just going to have a bunch of mush, an incomplete structure that's not viable. It can't survive. So how do we learn to break free of these old thought patterns that limit our thinking, that paint the world as black and white or either or thinking? These patterns that keep us stuck in the old time-worn ways of doing things that are maybe even be worn out, right? In The Science of Mind, Ernest Holmes, in How to Use the Science of Mind, this is from the reading this morning, he said, "Behold, I make all things new. There is nothing permanent but change, and the infinite intelligence can never be caught in anything it does. What it does express its being at the particular time. Tomorrow it may do it in an entirely different way, but always in accordance with its fundamental harmony." Right? So it might seem random because there is more than one way of doing something. And when we do our prayer treatment, we make our request to Spirit. Well, it's not limited to just that either or thinking. It has lots of options. And so it'll pick the optimal one for this point in time. It may not always be the same. We need to get used to having that, things not quite always being the same. Now, one of the ways that the Zen Buddhists do this is by using koans. Koans are nonsensical, paradoxical statements, riddles, questions, and stories that open up statements to what is called the Great Doubt. Koans shed light on the limitations of logic, reason, and thinking. And this is a meditative practice to open us up to experiencing reality rather than trying to understand it. Don Diata, who's the author of a book called See for Yourself, Zen Mindfulness for the Next Generation, he explains it this way. The koan serves as a surgical tool used to cut into and then break through the mind of the practitioner. Koans aren't just puzzles for your mind that figures it out suddenly and proclaims, aha, the answer is 3. No, instead the koans wait for you to open up, to allow the necessary space for them to enter into your depths, the inner regions beyond knowing. right? Beyond knowing. So we're not knowing with our logical mind, we're knowing with our whole being connected into spirit, to that infinite mind of spirit. So here's a few examples. Two hands clap and there is a sound. What is the sound of one hand clapping? You may have an immediate automatic answer, but sit with the question a little bit longer. What does it say about duality and non-duality? Right? Here's another one. Two monks are arguing about a flag. One says, the flag is moving. The other says, the wind is moving. A third walks by and says, nope, not the wind, not the flag. The mind is moving. Whatever we see is going out in the physical world, whatever we experience in our mind is an interpretation of that, right? When people are blind, some people, their physical eyes function perfectly, but there's something going on in the circuitry in their brain that they don't see, right? And so or some people, the circuitry in their brain works just fine, but the eyes are not working. And so then they can have an implant that would allow them to have a signal that their brain can interpret. So this is partly how the idea of the world being an illusion coming out of Christian Science exists, right? Here's another example. This is from the Book of Awakening by Mark Nepo. And it's a story about he and his friend Robert went to visit the botanical gardens in Montreal. They were up early, and this is the largest bonsai collection in the world outside of Asia. They strolled to what's called the Chinese Temple Garden, a lush and yet simple retreat from the streets that covers acres. It's a place of renewal that was originally constructed in the 1600s in China, and then moved stone by stone to Montreal in 1990. So as Mark Nepo and Robert approached the massive gate, it was locked. And so Mark panicked, ready to demand entry after driving 400 miles from another country to see this beautiful garden. But Robert reacted more calmly, like an Oriental sage himself, and he treated the situation as if it was a koan, a riddle to be entered until its very assumptions shifted. So he began to walk around the outer wall of the garden. It seemed insurmountable. Mark followed along, frustrated, but Robert kept walking slowly along the high wall. And since the garden is stretched for acres, he wondered if we would have to walk the entire perimeter of the garden. The thought was making him cranky, but Mark kept strolling along behind his friend. Well, suddenly, when they had walked farther than was originally in their view, the walls disappeared. It turned out that the garden had no walls, save for the facade at its entrance. So they simply walked through the open grass to a path that welcomed them. How many thresholds that seem blocked or barred or locked in our own lives seem so from their initial viewing? But how many opportunities for true living are barrier-free if we can only remove ourselves and our mind from the traditional points of entry? As Emerson said, if we can remove our bloatedness from the situation, right? One of the amazing things about the origin of science of mind is, to me, is always the compilation of ideas from all fields of inquiry. And that comes from our founder, Ernest Holmes. Ernest was born in Lincoln, Maine, a little town, in 1887, the youngest of 6 brothers. He wore short pants until he turned 15, as was the custom in his family. And when the family moved to Bethel, Maine, he joined his older brothers at the private Gould Academy High School. Now, Ernest felt overly confined by having to study Latin and English and mathematics in school. From an early age, Ernest was always asking why and what and how. It made people crazy because usually they didn't have the answers. He was always going beyond what he and they knew. And as far as his schoolwork, rather than reading the assigned text, he preferred to seek answers to his wide-ranging questions at the library or by continually asking questions. Ernest didn't like to accept things just because some authority told him the answer. Instead, he would like to mold the ideas around in his mind and accepted them and rejected them at will. This is an example from his early teen years. He always claimed that if he had to have a hell, he would make it his own. Not that he believed in one, he said many times, but if there was one, God would have to have had a hand in it. And if he did have a hand in it, he would not be God. He would be the devil. Right? So obviously, Ernest had no problem not knowing the answer. And he was always seeking new ones. He was a voracious reader his whole life. A central theme was always life and religion. He would talk to anybody he met. Right? And there were some great, amazing people like Einstein that he had conversations with. But as he read about the religions of the world, both Western religions like Christianity, Judaism, and New Thought. Read a lot of Mesmer, Quimby, Mary Baker Eddy, and Emma Curtis Hopkins in New Thought. And he also read from Eastern religions like Buddhism and Hinduism, and the writings of Tamar Trower and the Vedantist. And there was a visiting Hindu meditation teacher that he studied with. He read books by mystics like Swedenborg and Christian Larson. He read about the latest ideas in philosophy with Emerson, science with Einstein, and psychology with Carl Jung and Freud. Right? So for Ernest, it was important that science of mind is a philosophy that supplements whatever religion people have. He always encouraged their congregants to attend church on Sunday mornings or synagogue on Saturday, and then come to Science of Mind on Sunday afternoon or take classes during the week. He didn't see them as in conflict in any way. He never sought to tell people that their own religious beliefs were wrong, only that there is more to the infinite mind to explore. He invited people to put the science of mind principles to use in their lives. He said there is a power for good in the universe and you can use it. That was his absolute conviction. He also said that science of mind should be open at the top. He famously said, if I come back in 50 years after I die and find that science of mind is the same as it was when I left, then there is something wrong. He thought that science of mind should always be nurtured by curiosity and should always be evolving. So in a world that works for everyone, it's the structure of the world can be likened to an iceberg structure. So at the top of the iceberg, what we see above the water level is the events that are happening in our lives. And so this is what's happening when we get up in the morning, go through our lives, what we do in work, what we're doing here in the center, what's going on in the wars in the Middle East, or what's going on with Philippines and China today, all these events. But just below the surface is the patterns. This is the way things have been repeating themselves over and over. And it's the patterns that lead to the events. Now below the patterns, there is this structure. Okay, so part of that structure is this either or demand, or that the beliefs, the systems of religion that we have, and the structures that we build our society on, that people count on to be always the same, right? This is the way you handle things. And then below the structure, what keeps that structure in place, at the bottom of the iceberg, is the beliefs and our assumptions. And that's where the real control is. That's the biggest part of the iceberg that controls everything going upward. So how do we make structural changes in our society? How do we stop repeating the patterns of the past? We have to start with our assumptions and belief systems. And that's what we do with spiritual mind treatment in the science of mind. We cut our way through whatever we see at the surface and look underneath to that spiritual truth that is wholeness, that is peace, that is love, that is joy, that is always there waiting to be manifest when we change our belief system to, rather than thinking that we're not good enough, or that there's always going to be war, or there's always going to be whatever it is, to see that, in fact, the evolution of life is about having that love manifest to the surface, right? And so we, rather than locking ourselves in dysfunctional world, we want to create worlds of wholeness. And the Centers of Spiritual Living is standing on the forefront of leading this change. We can step away from the tyranny of the or, of the limited choices, and embrace the genius of the I am. We can stand with vulnerability and curiosity and open ourselves to new possibilities, to possibilities that we have never even conceived of before. Ralph Peters has stated, the great paradox of the 21st century is that in this age of powerful technology, the biggest problems we face are problems of the human soul. Right? So it's not, in the 50s, they always thought that science and technology would solve all of our problems, but now we have climate change, and we have bigger weapons to fight wars. We haven't solved the problem of how to find peace, how to create peace. There's a great movie called Pride that I suggest that you all watch. It was filmed in 2014, but it was about what happened during based on true events in 1984 to 85, when miners throughout England were on strike for nearly a year. Right? Margaret Thatcher had sequestered the miners' strike funds, so the miners were really struggling financially. Right? Now, there's a gay and lesbian group in London named Gays and Lesbians Support Miners that raised more than 11,000 lira to support the miners' cause, more than any other fundraising group in the United Kingdom at that time to support the miners. They also donated a minivan to the miners in a small Welsh town when the miners' van broke down and the miners had no way to even travel to the picket lines. Right? They were that poor they couldn't even fix their own van. So the unconventional friendship between the GLSM, or the Gay and Lesbians for Supporting Miners, and the local townspeople began when the GLSM's leader, Mark Ashton, realized that they share a lot with the miners. Both groups were being ostracized and harassed by Thatcher and the tabloids and the police who had reacted violently to the gays when they were in London and having a gay parade, and also to the miners when they were picketing. Right? He asked himself, how could he support gay rights without supporting equal rights for everyone, including the miners and women and other oppressed groups? Right? So he got a group of 24 of his friends, and they began collecting donations in buckets while they were standing on the street, much like Santas collect money for Christmas for the Salvation Army every year. Now, at first, as the money was accumulating, they wanted to pass it on to the miners. Well, at first, they couldn't find a local union that was willing to accept their donations, much less their phone call. Right? But finally, they found a small town in the Delae Valley in South Wales, a very tiny town. And so they called them up and said, we'd like to donate this money. So one of the miners from the town made his way to London to accept the money and say thank you. Well, he thought that L stood for London. It was a pretty bad phone connection. And when he got there and realized that here was this group of gay and lesbian people right in front of him, and they were so earnest and they really wanted to share, and they had this great gift, things started to shift for him. Right? Miners were not known for having the most open minds. Right? But here, they were in need, and here were people offering help. And so he goes to a gay bar, and he says, I want to thank people for this gift. And so the Mark Thurston, the leader of GLSM, says, okay, let's take you out and put you out on stage in this gay bar. So the drag queen steps aside, and he comes up to the front, a little nervous. And he says, what I'd really like to say to you now is, thank you. If you're one of the people that's put money in these baskets, if you supported LGSM, then thank you. Because what you've given us is more than money. It's friendship. When you're in a battle against an enemy that's so much bigger, so much stronger than you, well, to find out that you have a friend that you never knew existed, well, that's the best feeling in the world. So thank you. That was Di Donovan, who was a miner, and now at the present day, he's a trade unionist, right? And so the LGSM group made their way to this little town, the Delay Valley in South Wales, and the town had a gratitude dinner for them. And at first there was some bunch of people got up and walked out, but most people stayed. And they learned that they had a lot to share, that they had a lot in common, that they were both people, all people, and they could be friends supporting each other. And it's a great movie, very funny and uplifting, and I recommend it for anyone. It's on Paramount Plus or Amazon Prime. Now, in the end, most of the coal mines in England did close, and the miners had to find other employment. So it didn't work out so well for them. But for the lesbian and gay activists, the outcome was more positive. The miners came to London to march with them in the 1985 Gay Pride Parade. Right? LGSM's activism put gay rights on the UK agenda, and it led to the approval of same-sex marriages. So it was the beginning of them coming into the visible front and finding acceptance, not only by the miners, but throughout the country. Right? Ernest Holmes said that change is the law of human experience, for only God is permanent. The infinite mind is forever conceiving new ideas, and the infinite law is forever producing new forms. So this is what we're looking to do. In the reading we talked about, everything is always changing its outer form. But the eternal spiritual truth doesn't change. It is only changing its expression, evolving its expression into an ever more complete and fuller expression in the world. And so with our own Center for Spiritual Living, Tahoe-Truckee, we're considering some new options. It's just as important for spiritual communities that want to explore non-traditional pathways to experience the divine and find meaning in our own lives, in our own center. So we're endeavoring to be open at the top. Now, we're letting go of the old patterns and embracing the genius of the end, allowing our minds and hearts to stretch and include all of life's possibilities. It's okay to say, I don't know, and approach the question with playfulness and curiosity in our own lives as well as for our center. It's okay to stay in the question rather than know the complete answer, for that's the only way that we can evolve. Now, how do we do this? Well, one way is the process of visioning, right? We had the great vision that we did a few years ago, coming up with our good to great vision. And that's the long-term what we're seeking. But we can also do visioning every step along the way, incrementally, as we make that change in the structure, right? And so we're going to start a visioning group that'll be meeting, I don't know if it'll be meeting weekly or twice a month or once a month or something, but we'll be starting something of that and looking for our own center. What are we called to be? our goal is to create that beloved community, which is a safe, loving, and sacred space where we can individually and collectively share spiritual community and transformation. It's for ourselves and for future generations. So one possibility that we're considering is holding traditional Sunday services only once a month. That would provide us a lot of time and energy for other types of classes and discussion groups, spiritual practices. It's a paradox where less is more. This might be the way that we can have time to have sessions on heart math, right? Or have yoga in the center. We can have spiritual discussion groups. So have that intimate experience, right? And so we're small and mighty, but we want to be bigger and mighty. And so how do we invite new people in? So it's an evolution of our spiritual practice. What is meaningful for us now, both for us and for future generations? This is the genius of the and. This is what we are seeking for ourselves as individuals and for our center. Let's take this to prayer. So as we are here today, in this moment, we sense that divine, infinite, invisible that is there beneath the surface, supporting us, expressing itself as us, loving us, guiding us forward. And as we let go and let ourselves be supported by this infinite source, we find it bubbling up to the surface of our awareness. And we let go of something that we have been holding onto that perhaps is no longer supporting us. And we find that we are buoyed up by Spirit completely supported. And we find as we let go, the horizon widens, and there are greater things that are yet to be, that are ready to come forward. This is what it's like to be a part of the One, to be a part of infinity. And so we are not closed in our little space alone. We are not closed in just a small group that is holding on together. We are part of the infinite One that is God, the infinite love that enfolds us, surrounds us, supports us, and is expressing itself in and through and as each one of us, as this community, and rippling out into the world. And as we share that love with the world, there is an awakening of hearts and minds everywhere. We are called together to experience the One, to spiritual practices that connect us with that One, that allow us to awaken together, embracing all and serving with love while awakening to the One. And these ripples of love go out into the world everywhere, touching and healing our community, touching and healing anyone that has a challenge today, that they feel that they're not enough. And that love reminds them that they are beloved, that they are a part of the One, that they are enough because they are part of the infinite One. And the love coming through us is here for them. And we let that love ripple throughout our nation, to our capital, to what is going on there, to let each person know that it is not their striving, their will that is creating wholeness. It is this infinite God that is present within each one, that calls us to be brothers and sisters, created together by God, together in oneness, together in wholeness, to rise up to see the value of each person here and allow each person to be their authentic self, to embrace each other and rise together in peace, to create a new world that is built on love and understanding, collaboration. And we also let that love go around the planet, touching each and every place where there is anger and fighting and war, touching each person, whether they are leading the fight or just part of the fight or just someone that's there trying to endure the moment. Each person is a beloved creation of God, a beloved part of God. And so, as we let go and let God, we feel that infinite love touching the fear that this might be the end or whatever within us. And as those places of fear, those dark spots within us are healed, those dark spots are healed in each and every person and each and every relationship, in each and every country, every space. And so the old ways are dissolving, falling apart, and a new way is rising up, which is built on wholeness and love and acceptance and peace, togetherness, oneness. For this is the truth, the spiritual truth that has always been and is now coming to fuller and greater expression in this world. And it stands steady and strong, stronger than anything that would try to counter it, because that is only a lack of love, a lack of understanding, a lack of that divine peace. And so as the light fills the room, fills the darkness when we turn on the switch, when the sun comes up, that new world is now coming into form, for the light is now shining. We let it shine in our own hearts, through our own eyes, and throughout the world. And together we stand up and say, now is the time. We let go and let God be this truth. We surrender all things and find that we have discovered the greater yet to be. Infinite wholeness and clarity, peace, love, and understanding. I am so grateful to see this, to know it, to experience it, to know that these gifts have been so generously and graciously given from the infinite source. I am grateful for its power in my life, for its power everywhere, for the power and presence of the divine. And so as we let go and let the law of cause and effect bring it into being, we know that it is done, and even greater. And together we say, and so it is.